That's really
to which they were witnesses. Okay, fine. Right, I understand it now.
From someone using the New Testament.
That's a different discussion. But that's a different discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a different discussion.
I agree.
I have a question.
It doesn't relate to what you're making.
Well, we're all laymen here, but we're having a debate.
My topic is
can I?
Why does this matter?
Okay.
But you're a Christian.
Well, I don't know whether you are. Is that all right? I don't know whether you are.
Why does this matter?
It doesn't matter to you. That's
So now, how do you interpret that
right.
verse?
I don't know. I would need to reflect on it further.
Says the rabbis and the sages who were given the responsibility.
Yeah. I don't understand why there's a big issue.
Prophets were judging by it.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that. So they were responsible.
It doesn't say what you claimed. You misrepresented, like Christians seem to do on the text.
But as I said,
I'd like to see what the tafsir actually says.
Okay, I'll go into the tafsir. But my point was, it says the book was sent down, the Torah was sent to Moses, which the judged by. So that means you had a continuity, which would have gone all the way to Jesus. So if you had the book from Moses, there's a continuity of something called the Torah, which went all the way to.
But what is your point?
Jesus.
I don't understand why this is significant.
Because you keep going on a tangent,
what?
and I keep trying to explain. Then you keep going to Paul, and then you're asking me what.
No, I'm asking you to explain why this is significant.
Right.
I don't see what's the point.
Significance is if we can actually stick to the topic and not go on tangents about the New Testament.
No,
Get to my point.
No. Can I?
Because my point was.
Can I respond to this?
Half an hour. Because my point was this. My first question was.
We've been at this for half an hour. I'd like him to answer.
Did the Jews corrupt the Torah?
I've answered that.
I'm starting from the beginning, so we stay on track with what my point was.
Yeah.
So then, after you said no, and he said yes.
I said there were 4 senses in the Quran, as I understand it.
Then I said in the Quran it talks about, because I was talking about this verse, but I didn't bring it up. So I was trying to reference this verse to say this.
Yeah, I know. We know all this. Moving forward.
So therefore, my point was when we have things like the Dead Sea Scrolls,
yes,
for example, and we see a continuity in the text.
No, we don't.
The Masoretic text.
I disagree. And you failed to prove that. You said 99% is identical.
Right.
I asked him to do it, and he's failed to provide any citation from a single scholar.
I'll do some fact checking.
So you can't claim that. You've not backed up your claim.
Please find if the differences as well. If it's wildly different, as what Paul said.
Well, I said some differences in some books, but not in others. My claim is nuanced. Don't straw man me.
Right, so you don't know.
I do know.
No, in terms of the consistency of the Masoretic
I do,
text.
but I don't want to go into that. I want to go into my New Testament text. So let me respond now.
Yeah, but
can I say something? You've been talking a lot in the last 10 minutes.
You asked me what my point is. Now you don't want to hear my point.
No, I heard your point.
What was my point?
Right, let me speak now. Right.
Yeah, but what's my point? You asked for the clarification.
Paperboy, can you just back off and not interrupt for 5 seconds? Can you do that for 5 seconds?
You said you know my point.
I do.
Which is what?
And we've answered it in great detail.
What is my point?
And, excuse me. Now, I would like...
Well, you have to tell us your point.
Now,
exactly, that's my whole point. He doesn't know my point.
I do your point. You repeated it. I would like you to address my question. You promised that you would address my question once you had read that verse.
If you know my
have
point,
read that verse.
then you can just say what my point was.
No, I'm not going to play your game and parrot what you want me to say.
No.
My question is,
No,
why did
go on a red herring.
This is not a red herring.
Yes, it is.
Let me explain why it's not a red herring. Let me explain why. Let me explain. Let me explain. The accusation. This is very much germane about the Quran's claim that he has repeatedly referenced that the Jews corrupted the text of the New Testament, or they twisted it with their words.
Right.
There's multiple senses of tarif. It's not just one sense, it's multiple senses. And one of those senses is clearly in the Bible, in Romans chapter 9, which I read out just now, where Paul, a Jew in the 1st century, twisted the Torah exactly like the Quran says some Jews did. That's an actual example we can verify. No one doubts that Paul exists. No one doubts that they did.
He's defeating
hang on a second. No, I'm not.
Because Paul is saying Paul misquoted the Torah.
Yes.
How does he know Paul wasn't quoting the original Torah that you believe in?
Would you like me to answer that? Let me answer that. Look, he thinks he's made a good point here. Paul was a Greek-speaking Jew from Tarsus. He spoke Greek. All his letters are in Greek. He quotes from The Septuagint. Okay. That's the Bible he's created, not from the Jewish Bible, not the Torah, not the Hebrew Bible,
But how do you
the
know it
original.
wasn't?
Because Paul, excuse me, hang on a second.
From your end, but he's actually.
Hang on a second. Let me finish.
His
Let me
point
finish.
Is there was an original? So I'm saying
Yes,
then, if there
we
was
don't
an
have-
original, how do you know Paul wasn't
Because
quoting?
the original wasn't in Greek.
Paul was not quoting from the original. We know that
We know
because
factually
hang
and
on,
historically.
dude, let me finish. We know Paul's not quoting the original because he's quoting from the Septuagint. If you don't believe me, see what the scholars here say. This is the NRSV, which is the main academic translation. It has no value for you.
That doesn't help.
Okay, it says Paul quotes from the Septuagint. The author follows the Septuagint text. So he's not quoting from the Hebrew original anyway. But what he does, even in the corrupted version, he changes that.
But this is the point. How does he know what's in the original?
Because the Hebrew Bible that existed at the time of Paul, like the Masoretic text,
Right.
is different from the Septuagint.
But how do you know the Masoretic isn't the original?
How do we know that it is?
So you're
Okay,
making
let me
a
explain.
clean exchange.
Okay,
So that's why I'm saying
let
your
me-
point is a non-starter.
No, it's not. Let me explain
Because
how.
you would have to say.
I know the answer now.
Right,
okay,
fine.
we'll go back to this. The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, are believed by. You believe they're written by Moses, don't you?
Well, they were authored by Moses.
Well, that's what I just said.
Same thing.
That's the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Moses lived, what, 2000 BC, 2500 BC?
Yeah.
Would you be happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah? We'll say 2000 to be generous. 2000 BC. That's 4,000 years ago, right? What's the oldest copy of the Old Testament that we have in the world that exists today? What's the dating of that, do you think?
What's the oldest?
Copy of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, which Moses authored, according to you. I don't think he did, but according to you, the one we have is not authored by him. What's the earliest dating of the extant Torah that we have?
The full extant?
Yep. Earliest dating.
Off the top of my head, I know, for example, we have fragments of things, or not fragments, but for example, things, we have the silver amulet.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, by the
Yeah,
way.
I know, but I'm just saying,
What's the date of the Dead Sea Scrolls?
is about 2nd century BC.
Thank you.
Right.
Exactly right. So, remember what we just said?
He said, okay.
No, just follow. Let's follow this line of thought through very carefully. You have agreed that Moses lived about 2000 or even earlier
Right.
BC. The earliest copy of that very Pentateuch we have, he thinks, in existence is 200 BC.
Right.
Do you notice the gap? What is the gap?
It's a big gap.
My maths isn't very good. How many centuries is that, Nazem, roughly? Sorry? 18. 1,800 years gap between the time of Moses, which he said is the time of Moses, and the earliest copy of the Torah we have.
Civilization.
1,800 centuries. Now, are you telling me that this was passed down accurately for nearly 2 millennia without any changes, any corruptions, any alterations? The thing is, we just don't know. We can have no confidence, zero confidence that the Torah we have today goes back to Moses because we have no history, we have no isnad, nothing.
So that means he doesn't know whether it is or isn't the original.
We do.
No,
We
you
do.
don't.
No, I'll tell you how.
If you said you
I'll tell you how.
don't know, therefore you cannot say
We
make
know
a
with
claim.
certainty. I make that claim with certainty. The claim is clear. When the Quran tells the story of Moses or any of the prophets, when it does do sometimes, this is the speech of God himself, who being a perfect
That's a
omniscient being
presupposition.
knows exactly what really happened. And let me finish, because you asked me how do we know. When the Torah we have differs with what the Quran says about the story of Moses, we know that the Quran, we know the Torah has been corrupted because the real story is in the Quran. That's how we do.
University, co-editor of Oxford's Encyclopedia of the Dead Sea Scrolls, says if the Masoretic version is the one and only true Old Testament, then the Dead Sea Scrolls are extremely good news for Bible believers, Jewish or Christian. The Masoretic manuscripts among the Dead Sea Scrolls are astonishingly similar to the standard Hebrew texts 1,000 years later.
Thank you very much.
Proving that Jewish scribes were accurate in preserving and
Well, Bart Ehrman says very. Sorry, who's this woman? Who's this
same
person?
Bart Ehrman that says there was a crucifixion.
Lawrence Schiffman of New York University, co-editor of Oxford's Encyclopedia of the Dead Sea.
Bart Ehrman. Thank you for that quote. Bart
Can you
Ehrman.
show the Bart Ehrman quote? Please, can you show the
okay,
Barham
one moment,
quote?
please.
No, you asked me for
No.
a specific quote.
Okay,
evidence.
I will in a minute. But in the meantime, I want you to address. I don't want you to get away with this because I know you want to divert the subject away.
I'll look for that quote.
If we have the Torah that you said was given to Moses 2,000 or longer BC, and the earliest copy of the Torah you admit yourself is just 2 centuries BC, how can you know, or any, that the Torah we have now is not being changed or corrupted in any way? There's 1,800 years difference according to your own calculation. How would you address that?
Well, there's 2 ways of addressing that. So one, it then removes the claim that Paul can make and say there was an original Torah, because by his own words, he doesn't know either. So therefore, when we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, firstly, he will say before, but at least we can see a stability in the text from 2 BC until the Masoretic text, which is about 10th century. So a 1,000-year period, there's a very, very small disagreements, which Paul said actually according to Bartman, there was loads. So in terms of
There are.
Years is a long time.
exactly. So now he's talking about 2,000 years.
Coming back to the 2,000-year gap in records, how do we know it's reliable?
So now, in terms of the reliability,
Yep.
in terms of the text, can we know if there were any changes?
He just asked you, what do you think?
No, how do we know that? How can we know that a text, which allegedly was transmitted without any evidence for nearly 2,000 years,
So this is
was
where-
preserved reliably and authentically intact?
So-
How can we
so
know
in
that? Is
terms
my
of-
question to
In
you.
terms of what the Bible, when I say the Bible, the Old Testament narrates,
Yeah, well,
we
John,
have
you-
something called historical criticism, which the Quran doesn't have. Now, we then look at the reliability of some of the stories that it relays. So, for example, it makes claims about David. We find archaeological
Is there a
evidence.
system to doing this?
No, in terms of the
Or
text.
does every individual
Yeah.
choose?
We're talking about manuscripts. There's no manuscript evidence for nearly 2,000 years. How can we know it's reliable?
Right.
And he
what
says
I'm
we
saying-
can.
So I'm saying this, in terms of the textual reliability, because we don't have anything earlier, we have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
So therefore,
So we can't know.
We can only base it on the evidence that we do have.
What evidence
and
is
when
that?
we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which he quoted to
No,
the
but
Masoretic
that's just
text,
200 BC.
which is a 1,000-year period.
Yeah.
And as he said, it's the similarity is almost exactly the same, very similar in the text. So we see a stability.
Bartman doesn't agree with that.
So that's why I said if the Jews were corrupting the Torah in the time of your prophet, but we have a text that is stable, where were those changes in the Torah at that time? We don't see it in the Masoretic text. We see a stability in the text, so therefore the claims in the Quran don't ally to reality or what we find archaeologically. Now, in terms of the reliability of the Bible, we also have things like archaeological evidence that validate many of the claims that it states.
For example,
Let me finish. Let me finish.
What about Moses,
Let
for
me
example?
finish.
What archaeological evidence do you have about Moses?
Yeah, I'm going to just finish on one point, and I'm just going to show you guys something.
Also, you haven't really addressed it.
So do you want me to?
Yeah, I said it. I said we don't have
You don't have a method of finding out what
because we don't have anything earlier. We've got nothing to verify. But I said then the secondary
we have nothing to
method is
verify.
look
So
at
we
the
can't know.
Dead
It's
Sea
quite a
Scroll.
big- it's a lot.
We have
That's why I said
nothing
we
to
have the Dead
verify.
Sea Scrolls,
So we can't know what the original is.
And the
We
Masoretic
can't know what it is. Game over. Game over.
10 AD, 1,000-year period, and they're saying the text is very similar. Maybe a few minor differences.
No, there's some big differences.
Because
Big differences.
It shows a textual stability.
Okay, let me respond to that now. The reason this is faulty is for many reasons. One is that, particularly in the medieval period, Jewish scholars became very organized as scribes, as translators, as copyists in guilds, and they became quite good at copying manuscripts in the later period of the Jewish era. So I'm not surprised that in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, 11th century AD, you do have a reliable transmission because you had these professionalization of the scribes in copying. But you can't, and this is why you're saying is invalid, you can't say, because it happened in the late medieval period, if we go back to 1000 BC or 1500 BC, hang on,
We do have a fragment.
you
Well,
have
it's not a fragment.
I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished yet. You can't then say, because they were professional guilds in the Middle Ages, therefore we can use that and say, throughout Jewish history, it's always been like that. No, it wasn't. In the earlier centuries, there wasn't this reliable transmission.
To clarify
coming back to the second point is, it's bad news, unfortunately, for you. If you're going to rely on historical criticism, and when I was at university studying this...
It's bad news for him because his claim is there was an original Torah.
I haven't... Can you let me finish? Let me finish.
Making the claim.
No, let me finish.
That there was an original.
You're saying historical criticism somehow backs up your claim. It doesn't. According to most Western historians, Moses didn't even exist.
Okay.
He's a fictional character. There's no... The fact remains, and I take no pleasure in this, there is no archaeological evidence whatsoever for Moses' existence.
Right.
Zero for Abraham, or in fact for most of the early prophets. Also, there's no evidence that Moses or Israel was ever in Egypt the way the Bible describes it. So there is no evidence for this, apart from the Bible, which has a nearly 2,000 year gap between the earliest manuscripts and the stories it allegedly describes. This is a huge gap.
I think he wants to acknowledge the gap.
No, he doesn't. Mind the gap. As you say in London Underground, mind the gap. Mind the gap.
He made some points. So now,
archaeologists.
System that held on to the authenticity during the 1800 years.
Thank you.
That's all he wants to know.
Yes.
What did you have holding it in place?
Thank you. This is an excellent question.
It was the prophets.
Not the Quran. You don't believe in the Quran. You don't believe in the Quran. Argue from your own views.
This is why.
Don't talk. You're a Christian.
Let me make my point. This is why his arguments go against his own.
I'm asking for historical reasons.
What's the system?
You don't believe in the Quran.
Let me address the historical part.
Thank you.
For example, not everything in history is provable. There are some things that are hidden in history, like Moses. But we have found something recently which is actually greater than the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's the curse tablets from Mount Ebal. Now, if you don't know about
I don't know.
But this is not proving a system.
Let's see what this great evidence is before we... Let's see what this great evidence is. Remember, we got a point of 1,800 years with no textual transmission at all, and he says it's still reliable.
So I'm addressing the archaeological point.
So what is the evidence?
Because so now, Mount Ebal was where Joshua went, and Joshua was the companion of Moses. Now it says, inscribed on a tablet of Agan lead, the curse in Proto-Canaanite script was a legal document. It says a team that deciphered it using high-tech scanners. So it says, let me just show you.
What's this got to do with the manuscript transmission for 1,800 years? I'm not denying Moses existed. I'm not denying Joshua existed. I'm saying your text does not support...
I listened to you, and then I responded.
But this is not really helpful.
I listened to you.
This is not really relevant.
It doesn't matter.
You're not answering the question.
Let me land and then respond.
Land, I like that.
Sorry,
it's a nice metaphor. It's coming in.
The discovery of a cursed tablet has unleashed an archaeological earthquake and could be a key clue in proving when and who truly wrote the Bible. The folded lead tablet, which contains a curse on the inside, was discovered on Mount Ebal in the Holy Land, a place associated with curses in the Bible.
Do you believe there was a curse in there?
Yeah, let me finish. It has been dated between 1200 and 1400 BC and features the Hebrew word for God, Yahweh, in what could be the earliest ever appearance. If the dating is correct, it may prove that the Israelites were literate when they entered the Holy Land and enabled to document the Bible events as they happened. Archaeologist Scott Stripling said it's extremely important. Some are describing this as the most important find of our lifetimes because it predates anything we have before regarding the Hebrew scripts. Now, the reason why I'm bringing
this year, right?
It was discovered this year. So the reason why I'm bringing it in is because his claim is that, one, in terms of textual preservation, so I've already said we don't have anything earlier in terms of saying there's a consistency in the text, and I've conceded that. I've then said, well, the only other thing we can do to look at the textual preservation is look at the other thing we have, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls from the 2nd century BC and the Masoretic.
That's not a system. That's just an object.
Again, my point is, then you would have to concede that there seems to be, from the observable
evidence... It's not about
evidence,
us conceding, it's about you making your point.
But again, let me make my point. My point is, if we have evidence, and from the evidence we can observe, there is preservation or stability of the text, the fact that you're claiming that it has changed, maybe I cannot prove it hasn't changed, but you can neither prove it has changed either, which was his point. So my initial question
He
to
can't
him,
prove it hasn't been changed.
Right.
Can we just remember this in camera? You cannot claim that it hasn't been changed. So this means, this is a really important point, you can have no confidence in the reliability and trustworthiness of your scriptures because you cannot know that they've not been changed. Game over. I've established my point. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going. Thank you. Because that's all we needed to do. Thank you.
Because he has
Thank you for your time.
which was
Thank you for your time.
that the prophet
I noticed that you read quite a fair amount. All right. I was wondering, can you make any recommendations for any history books for listeners?
Gosh, on what subject?
Basically, so you know how
Yeah, I mentioned him because he makes lots of recommendations on history, historian, Islamic history. He's a master on the subject. So he would be recommendations based on I need to check in my if you like, I can take your and let you know. To the top of my head, I can't remember. What should we do? Give me contact details and I'll either check in my own books at home or ask Adnan for a recommendation. But I want to get it right rather than just give you something top of my head. Yeah, so I'll contact